Welcome to the Park and Recreational Advisory Board meeting. The City of Gladstone is abiding by guidelines set forth in House Bill 2560, which requires the governing body of the public body to extent reasonably possible to make all meetings accessibly remotely through technological means and provide opportunity for members of the general public to remotely submit oral and written testimony during meetings to extent in-person oral and written testimony is allowed. Therefore, this meeting will be open to the public both in person and virtually using the Zoom platform. First, we'll start with roll call. So if, Kristen, do you still need us to say names and then present?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Justice, if you'll start.
Here, Chairman.
Can you give your name at the same time?
Justice Mills.
Cam Agramson, present.
David Michael here.
Nancy Turner, present.
Bruce Hildreth, present.
Eric Butler, present.
Kate Cornelius here.
Okay. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the January 8th, 2024 meeting minutes. I had one correction or one addition. I know the term backfill. We had talked about this, so I wanted to take this moment for Darren to clarify how that term was used.
Yeah, so that is meaning to fill in any dollars that are above the grant amount for that project.
So it means money, not dirt.
Correct. Money,
Okay.
not dirt.
Okay. There was some confusion about that, so I just wanted to make sure that we knew that was money, not dirt. Okay. Does anyone have any other clarifications for our minutes from that meeting? Would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the minutes by David Michaels and seconded by Kate, that we accept the motions. And then we need a vote. So Justice?
I approve.
I approve.
I approve.
I approve.
Yes, I approve.
I approve.
Yes.
Okay. We're privileged tonight to have Elaine Stewart with us. She is a retired senior natural resources scientist with Metro's, she's retired, excuse me, I don't know if I got that word in there. A retired senior natural resources scientist with Metro's nature area programs. She will discuss the characteristics and value of oak ecosystems, their resiliency to climate change, and the oak habitat at the Gladstone Nature Park. So Elaine, thank you for coming tonight. We so appreciate.
All right, thank you. Is this getting picked up okay? Well, it looked like the little screen.
Hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. I gotta, let's see here. Where do I do that? Why am I not finding it? Which one?
Thank you. All right, well, thank you for having me here tonight. I am retired. I spent about 25 years with Metro in various forms of parks and natural areas programs. And most of the work that I did was habitat restoration work. Really focused up at Smith and Bybee Wetlands in North Portland. If you know that area, wetlands are one of my original loves. But I also worked in a number of oak and prairie habitats. including Kanema Bluff in Oregon City. The Graham Oaks Nature Park down in Wilsonville was I did the initial planting design and installation down there. Cooper Mountain Nature Park in Washington County, and also worked on the closed St. John's landfill, converting that from mostly dominated by pasture grasses to having a rich wildflower component in there to benefit birds, pollinators, and other wildlife. So tonight I'm going to talk with you a little bit about Oregon white oaks and the ecosystems that we have here in the valley. So what is so special about Oregon white oaks? I mean, as opposed to any other oak, we probably all have our various favorite oak trees. Mine is Oregon white oak. Just for the record, the genus and species, Quercus garryana. In different areas, you may hear it referred to as Gary oak rather than Oregon oak. There are more than 200 species of wildlife that use oak woodlands and oak savannas. These habitats support unique plant communities that are really not found in other habitat types in Oregon. One of the most interesting things to me about our oak and prairie habitats in Oregon is that they were very actively managed by indigenous people before settlement and colonization occurred in Oregon. Indigenous people set prescribed burns for a number of reasons, but they routinely burned the prairie habitats and the oak savannas here in the Willamette Valley on roughly probably averaging about a 3 to 5 year basis. So they were very active land managers. Because of millennia of this style of management, it makes these oak savannas and prairies very fire resistant. Oaks have a very thick bark that resists damage from fire. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Oregon white oaks can live up to 500 years. And it's not uncommon to see trees that are probably between 200 and 300 years old. If you're traveling through any of our particularly agricultural areas where those big mushroom-shaped oaks really stand out as you look across a field, those are probably well over 200 years old. There are also a lot of oaks in places like Camassia Preserve, Kanema, also Gladstone Nature Park that are smaller, wirier, kind of twisted looking. Those oaks, we haven't done much aging on them, but they could easily be just as old. They're just growing in such thin soils and harsh habitats. So Oregon oaks are the flagship species of an entire range of habitats, of woodlands, of savannas, and also indicative of the really open savannas that are almost more like prairies. These are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the Pacific Northwest. This graphic I pulled out of a nice book that was published by Bureau of Land Management a number of years ago. It kind of runs the full gamut of all the benefits that oak trees can provide. They increase the diversity of native insect populations by supporting a number of species of insects. Going clockwise from the bottom left, if you move up, you can see some galls there. There are a number of wasps that lay eggs, and the plant creates galls around them to protect itself. Oaks are one of very few trees that can provide cavities while the tree is still living. If you think about it, if you're going for hikes and you see cavities in tree stems, a lot of times you could be looking at the remains of a dead fir or cedar or other tree. But oaks can lose a limb, have a cavity that is used by wildlife, and the rest of the tree is still alive. So they're a bit more of a multitasker in that regard. They support a lot of different kinds of lichens, mosses, ferns. They're really important food source for many species. The bird that is shown there next to the holes in that picture is an acorn woodpecker, which is pretty uncommon in this area. We see a lot of them around Forest Grove and farther down in the valley. But they're pretty cool birds. They gather acorns and they cache them in these stems of dead oak trees. They're called granaries. And these birds are they have a very social, community-oriented way of managing their granaries, that they all contribute to them and they all eat from them. And oaks also maintain a whole host of ecological processes, everything from shade and moisture conservation in the shade near the tree. They support many kinds of fungi, also called mycorrhizal fungi, that are really important for soil health and for the health of the tree itself as well. So I mentioned before that these systems are some of the most endangered habitats in the entire Pacific Northwest. The figure on the right, if you look at the little black and white box to the upper left of that figure, it is shaded in a dark gray, what is the Willamette Valley. So then if you try to take that and translate that to that multicolored diagram there, that is the valley between the Coast Range on the left and the Cascades on the right. All of the light tan, the orange, and the darker olive green. This darker green, not the deep green. These are fir forests here, but all of this olive, orange, and peach color, those are all prairie, savanna, and woodland systems that were mapped by surveyors from the General Land Office out of the federal government in the 1850s. So this is what the Willamette Valley used to look like 150, 175 years ago. The General Land Office surveyors did very detailed surveys across the entire state, but our area of interest right now is the Willamette Valley. And if you ever want to do a deep dive into some arcane but fascinating reading, their field notes are published online by the Bureau of Land Management. And you can actually see the handwritten notes of these surveyors in like 1849, 1850, 1851, as they are mapping and they are describing their the trees that they are using for their markers and how many chains it is from one tree to the next. So they did very detailed surveys, and these maps were created by John Christie and Ed Alverson from those notes in a very painstaking exercise. They published that about 25 years ago. On the lower left is a picture of oak savanna in a gradient. I'm trying to point this well so that I don't blind Bruce or Nancy with this laser pointer. So the more open areas here are more of a oak prairie savanna gradient, and then up here is oak woodland. So this is what they look like on the ground. Okay, so you have a geek talking tonight, so I've got to show you a graph. This is also work that Ed Alverson has done. He was with the Nature Conservancy for many years. He's with Lane Council of Governments now. This graph shows, the bar chart shows how tightly linked how many species are to prairie and oak habitats in the Willamette Valley, going up to the Puget Sound area. So the 386 over the green bar represents 386 species of plants, trees, shrubs, grasses, wildflowers that are very tightly linked. They're very high fidelity to prairie and oak habitats. This means you're hardly ever going to see any of those 386 species in a different habitat type. There are another 340 something species that are moderate and low fidelity. Those are ones that you'll see in other places as well. The illustrative picture I put up here by Cheryl Schultz is a Fender's blue butterfly nectaring on a Kincaid's lupin. Both of those are very tightly linked to oak and prairie habitats, and they are both at high risk. I mentioned before that there was very active indigenous land management. The people who first lived here set prescribed burns. They improved forage for deer and elk. There's also some information to indicate they may have also set burns to drive deer toward hunters for a hunt. The regular fire improved camas production and production of other first foods plants, reduced the shrubs, probably helped with acorn production as well, and very importantly, prevented firs and other trees from encroaching on these habitats. Oaks are very intolerant of shading. And when fir trees move on to the same landscape that the oaks are in, firs grow faster and they get up and they overtop the oaks, and the oaks eventually will succumb. They will not survive encroachment by firs and maples and other forest trees. So what is the result of all this active burning is a fire-resistant landscape. You look here at this picture from, I think this is Coburg Hills down near Eugene. The fuels are very short. There's not a lot of shrubs, not a lot of ladder fuels to carry a fire up into the crown and create a catastrophic fire. So the fires that do occur in these systems, or that historically occurred in this system, tend to be low intensity. They also are very drought resistant communities. This is a Pacific madrone, which is a spectacular plant. You can see how it loses the outer bark, and the inner wood of the tree is just such a beautiful color. But all of these oak and prairie plants, they're adapted to low moisture conditions in the summertime. Most of the wildflowers that we see in these systems, not all, but a great many of them, bloom briefly and then die back. So they don't have extended needs for water. It makes them very low maintenance in a garden setting, which is really convenient. Once you get them established, you don't have to water them anymore. Also relevant to being fire resistant and drought resistant, these are very climate resilient plant communities. They provide abundant food for pollinators. There are well over 300 species of native bees alone in the state of Oregon. More than 100 species of annual wildflowers and another 150 species of perennial wildflowers are very commonly associated with these systems. So you can imagine the array of the bees of all the different sizes and all the different types of floral preferences. They all can find something that they need here. Oops, sorry. I just wanted to point. Here we go again. Okay, so the yellow one is a balsam root. That one may be most familiar to people who like to hike in the Columbia Gorge. during February and March. We actually have had balsam root through the Willamette Valley as well over the years. Many of these plants you just don't see out there on the landscape anymore just because their habitats have shrunk and become so fragmented. But balsam root has been found growing wild in Clackamas County and also all the way down to the Eugene area and even down into the Klamath-Siskiyou area. The Colomia up here on the upper right is an annual wildflower. I'm incredibly fond of this one because it has blue pollen. And if you catch a bumblebee visiting Colomia, like a honeybee, bumblebees have what's called a corbicula, a basket on their hind legs. And they will pack that blue pollen on their hind legs. And they're just really charming to see when they've been feeding on Colombia. Whoops, I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. With this many species, you can imagine how the bloom times can extend all the way from February through October because it's a succession of plant after plant after plant, which very conveniently coincides with the different flight times of butterflies that have characteristic times of year when they will be up and flying, with the all the different hundreds of bees that also have different times when they are active. I love to show this picture when I talk about prairie plants because that Danthonia, it's a California oak grass specimen that's been dug, washed, and provided for viewing in the Oakland Museum. Those roots were cut. They actually were originally 20 feet long. You want erosion control. You can't beat native sedges and some of these native prairie grasses. Also, imagining that root system under these prairie grasses and sedges, you can understand how fire can move across them and move across the landscape. They've got all those resources underneath. They can come right back up. They're very fire adapted. They also are not all of our sedges, but our native grasses in the Willamette Valley are all bunch grasses, which means they all grow in kind of a tidy bunch as opposed to having rhizomes. You know, you think about crabgrass, if you ever weed that out of your garden and you start pulling and then it goes on and then it goes on. Native grasses don't do that. Native grasses are in clumps. And this is really important for habitat values for wildlife because those spaces in between the bunches of grass provide space for the wildflowers to grow. It provides places for birds to nest. It provides spaces for our nesting bees. And 70% of our native bees are ground nesting bees. They dig tunnels into the ground or they use tunnels abandoned by other wildlife and nest in the ground. Just wanted to highlight a couple of wildlife species. Here's a western gray squirrel. Arboreal means that they prefer to move up in the tree canopy. They love an oak woodland where they can go from tree to tree to tree and never have to go down to the ground where a coyote or other predator or bobcat or other predator might get them. They feed in the oaks, but they also nest in open grown firs. So here's something that might initially seem like a contradiction, that you need to have fir trees by the oaks if you're going to accommodate the western gray squirrels. But it's because those big old wolfy Douglas firs. Wolfy is a term for an old Doug fir that was initially grown out in the open, and it's one of those that has all those stout branches coming out in every direction all the way up the trunk. That provides a lot of opportunities, a lot of choices for western gray squirrels for their nests. So they actually need to have an occasional big old fir next to their oak woodland. I mentioned earlier in one of the first slides that oaks have mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with them. More than 40 species of fungi are what we call obligates. They have to live with oak, and oaks provide for them. They attach to oak roots. They can get food from oaks. But in return, they also can make nutrients available to the roots of the trees. They can protect oaks from certain viruses and diseases. And of those 40 species, there are some 18 species of truffles that are specific to Oregon white oaks. So what are our threats to our oak and prairie habitats? What happened to that 400,000 acres? Land conversion, a lot of development, a lot of agriculture. We use the land for different purposes now. Fire suppression has been a tremendous threat for oaks. In this picture, oh, there we go again. I'm so sorry. I'm going to get this right. Probably on the last slide. This picture shows these little lichen encrusted branches of oak trees sticking out from a Douglas fir forest. If those firs are not thinned out or removed, those oaks are on their last legs. Firs, maples, cedars, all of the upland forest trees will grow faster than oaks and shade them out. The other thing that is noteworthy from all the decades of fire suppression that we see increasingly over recent years is the increased risk of catastrophic wildfire. When that forest catches fire, that is not going to be a low intensity fire. Those firs have a lot of sap. They pitches, they go up like matchsticks, and that would be a very intense fire moving through there. Invasive species are another threat. So for conservation and restoration practices for these oak and prairie systems, a big one you've probably already figured out is removing the Douglas fir, Oregon ash, big leaf maple, other trees that are encroaching, controlling invasive grasses, those rhizomatous pasture grasses that will take over an area, controlling exotic shrubs, and in some cases, native shrubs. I have controlled some native shrubs in different areas where there were populations of very rare plants, and they couldn't handle the competition from the shrubs. So they were probably much more abundant on the landscape back in the days when fire was more routine. People use methods ranging from fire to herbicide. Some folks are experimenting with grazing also, trying to find some ways to reduce grasses and encourage the other native plants. Plant and seed the native species, and very importantly, protect the oaks that we have now, especially those older trees, because as you've heard, if you didn't already know, they live a very long time. They take a very long time to get big and to grow. It may take an oak tree decades to produce its first crop of acorns. Here's an example of a site along the Willamette River in Clackamas County. I wanted to show you a before and after. On the left is before an oak release. You can hardly tell it's an oak stand because there are so many other trees and shrubs and things in the way. On the right, you can see the oak revealed after many of those firs and maples and ash trees were cut out of the way. And this is providing a new lease on life for some of these oak trees. So specifically to Gladstone Nature Park, it is a lovely park. It has some nice Oregon white oaks, Similar to Kanema Bluff and Camasia Natural Area, it has a number of thin soiled areas on the basalt rocks. You can find licorice fern and other special things growing in those areas. There's already a number of native species already present. You're fortunate to have a very dedicated friends organization. I got to visit the site with David and with Cindy Hines, and had a wonderful tour of the site. So I thought I should make myself useful, try to come up with some recommendations for what to do at Gladstone Nature Park. I would definitely preserve the oak trees that you have. Consider planting additional Oregon white oak, Pacific madrone, even ponderosa pine. There's a Willamette Valley ponderosa pine that is native to the Willamette Valley. I think some have already been planted down there, but those would be wonderful tree species for any new tree plantings that you want to do on the site. Continue the stewardship activities. Your volunteers, the friends, are making steady progress, weeding exotic plants out of the way and installing native plants. I have seen some of the species lists. For example, Cindy did a planting last fall and was just spot on in her plant selection. I would give her kudos for that. She's done her research about what will work on that site. I think that's it. Please ask.
Thank you very much. Is anyone on the board having any questions or in relationship to White Oaks or the nature park or anywhere else in Gladstone that might have an oak tucked away?
Can you set fire to things right now? Like, nobody wants to do that.
It's a difficult task in an urban area. And that is why people use other methods, grazing, mowing, herbicide treatments, because when you are close to infrastructure and residences and such, it's, you just don't want to put life and property at risk. At the same time, those systems are very dependent on disturbance. So it's something that you have to be able to provide somehow.
Okay. Anyone else have a question?
Kim Agramson here. So how close or far away would you want to plant a new white oak or Pacific madrone from a fir stand?
From a fir stand, I would, first I'd look at the aspect. I would want the oak, if in a perfect world, the firs would be north and upslope of the oak. Think of oaks as kind of needing, the winemakers say that their grapes like south-facing slopes. And I would say in this area, much the same is true of oaks, especially if they're near firs, because you don't want the firs on the south side to grow up and shade them out. And so depending how big and mature the firs are, an oak, it might be hard pressed to get it far enough away. A mature oak can have a crown or a root drip line that is 40, 50, 60 feet in diameter. So if you want to be able to grow an oak that's going to have that classic mushroom shape, then you'll want to plant it a good 20, 30, 40 feet away from any trees that might be encroaching on it.
Will they grow well on a slope?
They do. Oaks are incredibly tough. In some of the areas around Kanema Bluff and then across the river at the Willamette Narrows natural areas where I used to do work, oaks and madrones would literally be growing out of cracks in the basalt. they're so tough.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What do you think the outlook is for oaks in our region, given that Mediterranean oak borer has been recently discovered in the Willamette Valley?
You know, I don't know enough about the oak borer to really say. I mean, yeah, I know emerald ash borer is a terrible threat for ash trees. I don't know what the prognosis is with the oak borer. Hopefully not as grim as for the ash trees.
Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Um,
I'll just interact with
that's a no.
No.
Not typically. No, if you could hold your question and ask Elaine outside, that'd be great. I'm sorry. Yeah. The board's able to ask, but not the audience at this point. So any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Elaine. I hope to see you up in the nature park so you can tell me more about them. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
That was amazing.
Okay. So moving on our agenda, we're moving on to business from the staff.
So as you can see in front of you, everyone should have a binder. Um, Chair Nancy Turner and Vice Chair Kate Cornelius met up, and through that meeting, we had discussed having a binder that was full of information that was pertinent to the Parks Board. A lot of the stuff is things that have been asked for multiple times. Think that sort of thing. And the whole idea with having this is you will have that information readily available in your hands going forward. So when you have questions, refer to your binder before the answer may be in there is where I'm going. So I'm just going to go briefly down each one of the tabs here. Some of the tabs, City Administrator Betts is going to speak of on the first one, which is the roles and responsibilities. We have council goals is the next tab after that. In that, these are the goals that were adopted by council. And then after that is the progress we've made on those goals.
Wow.
So where we're at as of January 1 of this year. After that is the Parks Board strategic plan. This is the plan that was introduced a year and a half ago to council and then adopted by council. And then what we did is we took the top 4 goals out of that strategic plan, and then just kind of did took the information out of the site plan for those, or master plan, excuse me, for each one of those individual parks. And then the next one is the capital improvement plan. So we have the capital improvement plan for the master plan. And then we also have the capital improvement plan for Meldrum Bar Park and also for the nature park as well. And then after that is just kind of a map of where parks are in the city, that type of a thing, in case somebody's not familiar where they are. This also came straight out of the master plan as well. Moving on is the park amenities. These are the accounts of park amenities in all of the parks minus Meldrum Bar Park. Well, actually it has Meldrum Bar, but when we went through that exercise with the side amenities, we didn't include Meldrum Bar Park in there because the reason would be to, as we did things on the site plan with Meldrum Bar Park, that's when we implement those amenities in that park. Going on to the next tab is budget. So the first page of that is what is in the budget book that was done, that was adopted in 2023. And then the next page is the current summary of where we are within that budget. So when you look at this, you have your personnel services at the top, followed by your material and services after that. And then down below is the capital. With the capital, you have system improvements and projects. If you go down below that, there's a capital breakdown down below. A lot of times what you guys are always asking is how much money do we have in that fund? How much of that's coming from the fee machine? How much of that is coming from the Good Neighbor Grant through Wes, all of that. That is all broken down at the bottom of this. So what what the plan will be for this document is every month we'll bring a new document that has the budget breakdown as you see it here today, so that every month you continue to have that. And going forward, you'll know exactly where we are with budget. Next is the SDC methodology for parks. It has everything that that is how the SDCs and everything are spendable. If you look back on the capital improvement plan, when you look at the Parks Master Plan, which is the first one there, it says in there what is SDC available. In kind of the middle, it says potential funding sources, and it has all of that. If there's SDCs available in that plan, that's the methodology of which the SDCs are calculated for parks. After that is the Metro Share handbook. We thought that was pretty relevant considering it's fairly new to us, and if there was any questions, you'd have it in your binder there. You wouldn't have to go look at it online and go through all of that stuff. It's right here in the binder. And then the last is the West Good Neighbor Fund. So this is a map that shows where the Good Neighbor Fund can be spent. The monies from the Good Neighbor Fund can be spent. So if you look at the red dashed line that goes around all of that area, that is the area in which Good Neighbor funds can be expended in that area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Administrator Betts to talk about the roles and responsibilities for the Parks and Recreation Board.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you all for volunteering your time to be on the Parks and Recreation Board. My name's Jackie Betts. I'm the city administrator, and you have all been appointed by the Gladstone City Council. I'm trying to attend all of the advisory board meetings to thank them and to remind them that each group has specific roles and responsibilities that they're focused on. The city council adopts goals. They hire a city administrator then to implement those goals. And the advisory board is an advisory to the city council. And so in your binder under the first tab, just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight is that the Park and Recreation Board is established for the purpose of advising and making recommendations to the city council regarding Gladstone's recreation programs and facilities. And then it goes on to list about 8 functions that the Parks and Recreation Board has. I think when you have time, and I know you guys just got the binders this evening, there's new people on our committees, and just spend some time going over theirs to remind yourself. Specifically, what the city council is focused on in the next 2 years is our park system, and not only finding revenue for our parks, but also relying on this body to make recommendations on how those funds should be spent. And as you learned the last few meetings, that we have about $850,000 coming from Metro that needs to be spent on our park system by 2029. The other page that I wanted to call out is Exhibit B, and that is the City of Gladstone Advisory Board's guidelines for member conduct.
It should be the last page of the ordinance. The last,
Of the first tab
yeah. The last page of the ordinance.
Yeah. in your binder. I don't know if it has a page number. Exhibit B.
1B, the very last page of the front section, yep.
I just wanted to call out that it's important to remember that as a representative of the city, you are a public official. Oftentimes, people just think that the elected officials are only public officials, but all of our members of our advisory boards are public officials and therefore are held to a higher standard by council, staff, peers, and the citizens of Gladstone while performing your board responsibilities. You may be faced with difficult decisions and situations, and civility and diplomacy are not only important, but expected in your role as a city board member. The city council on your dais, I think all of you have it underneath your bias or your binder. There is this sheet that's on there, and the city council has adopted this team agreement that they will have open communications, respect, they'll act as one body, one team, and that they will meet with civility. There are going to be times when you're going to be passionate about certain projects or issues that are happening in the Gladstone community. And we just want to remind all of our volunteers that please remember to be civil and courteous to each other. And that's also in dealing with the members of the public, because you do represent the city and you are a public official. We also had an Oregon ethics training at the last week of January. And so for those of you that weren't able to watch that, we encourage you to do so, because all of your emails are public documents. If you are texting city business, those could also become public documents. And if you are conversing outside of a public meeting and talking about city business, those two could also become public. And I don't say that to scare anybody. It's just the reality of the world that we live in, that when you represent the city, everything you do in the city's capacity is public information. So with that, Darren, that's really what I wanted to cover over the roles and responsibilities.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Next on the agenda is a Tree City USA Tree Board. So the city and the city council has directed staff to work on becoming a Tree City USA. One of the things that needs to happen with that is we need to adopt a tree board. This tree board would meet at the beginning, probably a couple, maybe 3-4 times, the first year of that. And then after that, it would be less frequent than that. We're looking for people that we have FOGNAP members. We also are looking for other members within the community to become on this tree board. And so what I'm asking for tonight is a member from the Parks Board to be on that tree board that is not also a FOGNAP member. So if there's anybody that's interested in being on the tree board, I would really like to have them on that.
Depending on when they meet, I'm interested.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Do we need to vote on that, or?
I think it'd be good if Chair Turner wanted to make a motion in a second. And just so you know, Commissioner Butler, we haven't set the date or time yet, so we are open to working around those schedules.
Okay. Can I make the motion? Okay, I move that Eric be our representative on the tree committee. Do we have a second?
I will second that, Bruce Hildreth.
Okay, all in agreement?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Okay, Eric, you're it. Is that okay?
It is, just, can we remember to say our
Their
names?
names, right.
Please. Thank
Would you like us to do it again?
That's okay.
Okay,
I
thank
wrote it down.
All right,
The list of everything.
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for stepping up.
Next up is the bird viewing platform at the nature park. And I believe, Jackie, you were taking that one?
I'd be happy to, and I also believe that we have Nancy Eichstead here tonight to answer any questions. Fognap approached city staff a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of applying for a Metro Nature and Neighborhoods grant. And this is to build an all-inclusive bird viewing blind. There is a photo, but Nancy will tell you that's not really what it's going to look like. It's just to show you what a bird blind could look like there. Typically, the process is that these recommendations or projects would come to the Parks Board for you guys to consider and then to make a recommendation to the city council. And then the city council would do the same. The timing of this grant, however, was the deadline was a couple weeks ago. And so I authorized Nancy on behalf of Fognap to go ahead and submit the grant, and that we would then vet it with the Parks Board tonight. And it's also on the city council agenda for tomorrow night. So depending on what your recommendation is, we will transfer that recommendation tomorrow night to the city council. Just to talk a little bit in your packet about the bird viewing blind, it would be near the east overlook of the nature park that will adjoin the new ADA paved loop trail once that is complete. If awarded the funds, Fognap will have 2 years to complete the project. In the packet is also a copy of the proposal. And in reviewing this project, it does align with 2 of the city council goals. One is communications and engagement by enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility by removing barriers to better serve the community. It also is part of the Parks City Council goal and research funding opportunities to complete projects in the master plan. The amount that they're asking for from Metro is $79,500. There is no match requirement. And we would time this project so that we would first complete the archaeology study that I've updated all of you on the entire site, so that we could move forward with designing where the paved loop trail would be on the nature park. Conjunction with that, if Fognap is awarded these funds, we would also be discussing the placement of where the bird blind would be. Staff does not have any concerns with Fognap applying for this grant. And if you have any additional questions, like I said, Nancy Eichstadt is here to answer those for you.
Are there any questions from anyone on the board? Okay. Then I make a motion to, for the Park and Recs Board to support the Friends of the Gladstone Nature Parks application to construct an all-inclusive bird blind in the nature park if it is awarded those funds. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Justice, will you vote, please?
Aye.
Say your name and
Justice Mills, aye.
Kim Agrimson, aye.
David Michael, aye.
Nancy Turner, aye.
Bruce Silverth, aye.
Eric Butler, aye.
Kate Cornelius, yes.
All right. Next.
So next on the agenda is discussion regarding the naming of the 12 trails at the Gladstone Nature Park. Recently, we received an email from Fognap about this. Basically, they're wanting to hold off on doing the naming of the trails until the paved loop trail is in, because there's a chance that when that trail goes in, it could end up wiping out some of the trails that are there. So this is going to be tabled for another meeting once we figure out what's going to happen with the paved loop trail going forward. And then the, excuse me, the last thing from staff is park maintenance update. Currently staff is pressure washing at, well, we haven't got to all the parks obviously, but currently pressure washing at the parks, along with regular duties of bathrooms, trash, graffiti cleanup, things like that. The other thing is the staff is working with the RC people, RC track people, to get a meeting set up. We have contacts and made contact with them. We're hoping to have that meeting set up within the next 2 weeks, hopefully within the next week. Playground, the playground at Meldrum Bar Park, we just installed wood chips today for that. We will be planning on doing a grand opening soon. I don't want to put a date because we don't know the date yet. We're gonna need to add a few more chips to that before we open that up, but I had a load brought in today, and I'll get another load brought in to bring that up to where it needs to be. The swing at Robin Hood Park is kind of on hold right now. Everything's way too wet for them to get in there with equipment. They need to dig out to put in that swing set. They're hoping to be out there soon. I don't want to give a date again because I don't know. It all depends on the weather. The contractor seemed to think that they should be able to be out there within the next 2 weeks to dig that out, put in the swing set, and then we'll get the chips installed on that as well. And then that will be complete also. Staff has also been working on putting together all the park amenities, the picnic tables and trash receptacles that were ordered. For the most part, all of those are put together. Now it's just a matter of getting them out to the locations that we had talked about. I'm hoping to have some of that completed before our next meeting in March. And that is my update.
That's exciting. I don't know. I'm excited. I can't wait to see the first picnic table out there. We've talked about them so much. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Darren or Jackie?
I just want to say the Meldrum playground looks great. I ran past it today and was like, there's chips in there. And I've
Yeah.
just stared about that. Looks so good. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And if I could just add on to that, because we would like to invite all of you to the ribbon cutting with the city council. It will probably be at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Is there a day of the week that's better for any of you as we plan this? Or would you like me just to shoot out the dates?
Shoot them out.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Again, it's very exciting. So, all right. Any other business from the staff? Any questions? Okay, we're moving on to business from the board. So what I did was I went back and I we have a lot of our projects finished. When you look at the goals from the strategic plan in our notebooks, when we talk about the ones that we set up as a Parks Board. And so I overlap them with the council goals. And right now in process, we have Robin Hood Park these are the things that we're actually on track to meet. The Meldrum Bar the park play structure is almost all complete. The Nature Loop Park trail continues to get closer. We're going to get there. I think one of the things, Darren, that we have on our goal is that rezoning of Meldrum and the nature park. I wonder if you could kind of speak to that.
Yeah, so we're working with 3J Consulting, the planning folks for the city, and I believe that's going to council. I'm not sure exact date, but there is progress being made on the rezoning of the nature park, and I believe there's one parcel also at Meldrum Bar.
Okay. And those are being transferred to an open space as
Correct,
opposed to
parks
something
open
else.
space.
Okay, great. So hopefully that will be completed during this year too?
Yes, it has to go to Planning Commission first and then the City Council. And I believe this fall is when those dates are set for that.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, we have the Metro Bond money that's coming in that's going to help with the Nature Park bathroom shelter, Meldrum shelter, and possibly some ADA upgrades within the park system. So those are the things that we have. When you look at our Parks and Rec goals and also the council goals, those are all things that we're making lovely progress on. So the things that are still on the table for us to look at are these are some of the things that we can consider. One is the Ridgegate property, parcel A. And that we want to talk about Nick Shannon Park is also an option for some improvements. The Doll Beach connection, that was on the Parks Board. And I know that that's been placed kind of on hold because we're looking at funding from other sources, correct? Okay. So that one I think will be part of a bigger project. So that's kind of on hold for right now. Not that we're not going to do it, but the other one, so the last three goals on our strategic plan have to do with research and implication of park user fees for rental of covered areas, community partner on events that maintain citizen involvement, trying to get the process more user-friendly, and then also researching recreation programming that could be linked to transient lodging tax. Those are really interesting goals. They're not like items. We can't just go out and fix the park. These are ones we're going to have to kind of think on. So I'm not sure. When I read through them, I kind of understand what we were trying to get at, but I also think I need a lot more information on the background of those. So what I would suggest that we as a Parks Board do is to kind of target one of those goals each meeting for like the next 3 months and kind of do some research and bring that in, find out what's behind that goal, and then see if that's something that we can accomplish or if it's something we need to revamp. So I don't know how the board feels about that. I always look at you first, Justice, and you're smiling. So I'll look down here at Kate. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions about that, or do those goals seem a little?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question about the Doll Beach. It's on hold, and I understand we're looking for more funding for a good reason. There's a lot of options out there for funding that did not used to be there. This particular project is something that's dear to my heart. And so I've been kind of watching it well before I was on the Parks Board. And it's certainly has, because of all of its multi-connections. I know we've got to wait for Metro and we got to buy some property and all that. Is it possible that we can keep updated on the process of that ongoing as a board? Because to me, just saying, well, it's on hold is just the same thing that's been happening or we've been told for like many years now. Now, I understand there's something happening and, it would be really nice and make us feel better if we knew what kind of status it was in from time to time. Not regular, but as status changes, could we be apprised of that?
Absolutely. And I also put it in my weekly report that I send out to all of the volunteers when there is movement on projects. So all of you have the same information that I provide the elected official. What I can share with you that I've shared most recently is that through this process of identifying that Gladstone is going to get $850,000 of local share money, there's another pot of money that Metro has for acquisition of property for trail connectivity. That is what Metro is working on that goes to the Doll Beach piece of that then would go underneath to Meldrum Bar Park. So the last that the Public Works Director and myself met with them was before the holidays. We did a site visit out there. So that is the most recent activity that we've had with that project. Once Metro contacts the city again and gives us an update on where they are, then I'm happy to pass that information on.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The other thing Darren and I had talked about was in our planning for this meeting was looking at some of the smaller projects that are still on our list that we can start to target for upgrades. So, some of them, Ridgegate, Nick Shannon, now that we have our budget information and we know how much money are in some of the projects, I think the waterfront in Meldrum, down up the Clackamas River, all of those are ripe for using some of that West funds, and that could be something we could target. So I guess it's hard to just all of us sit here and say, okay, I want to do this. So what I'd like you to do, this is a request from me to you, is that between now and our next meeting, that you look at these goals and you look at the money, and then you go out and walk around the parks and come up with some, at least two projects that you think will be a good place for us to go and start looking at as a group. And then we can do that at our next meeting. So does that sound, okay? So that's what I ask you to do. So are there any other questions from the board on the notebook or things that you're concerned about? Worried? No?
No question, but can I make a comment?
Sure, sir.
Thank you for the notebook. This is wonderful. It brings, I think, newer people up to speed. And Nancy, thank you for giving us an overview of where we are tonight.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, when I sat down to start, I thought, wow, we've made a lot of progress. And I think that's something that over time we haven't been able to do, and it really needs to be acknowledged. Thank you, Darren. I can only imagine what the desktop looks like. And when you told me you had room for a few more projects, I was like, where? But I'm going to trust you and we're going to go with it. So, yeah, so now's a good time for us to kind of appreciate what we've gained, but look ahead on where we can go and start to target some of those plans. So I ask again, 2 projects. We'll see it next week or next meeting. So, business from the audience.
We have Nancy Eichstead here.
Regarding the bird viewing blind, I bet you're all wondering how they came up with that harebrained idea. And so I'm just here to give you a little bit of extra information so that when you're talking to folks in the community, you'll have a little bit of background. When we're up in the park all the time, working up there, we do notice that people use the park oftentimes who have varying abilities. And it was wonderful that the city has decided to put in this loop trail that would allow someone in a wheelchair or a walker to go out into the park in an area where they wouldn't normally have access because the trails are so soft. We actually have a birder that comes over from Somerset Lodge on a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, but he can't get out into the area where the birds enter the park, which is the East Overlake. So we thought it'd be a good idea to see what we could do about that. And I was also inspired when I was on Audubon's website by a young man who did an internship for Audubon and is now a Portland State student. And he is 100% blind and he does birding. And so it just made me feel like there ought to be something that we can do for folks like that should they want to do birding in the nature park. So there are in our community near that park, we have Somerset Lodge, which has folks with varying abilities. Exceed Enterprises brings folks up there who have difficulty walking on the soft trails. Tukwila has folks over the age of 55. Webster Ridge Apartments, that whole bottom row of Webster Ridge Apartments is handicap accessible, and there are folks in wheelchairs that can come over to the park. And once the loop trail is completed, they'll be able to use that. And once the bird blind is completed, they'll be able to use that. I've given you some data on bird viewing blinds. Birding ornithology, I was shocked to learn, is a $60 billion industry. And these numbers are from a couple of years ago, $60 billion. And that's worldwide, but it's growing. That's because there are folks like myself who are looking to retire and do more leisurely things and wildlife photography. But the amount of money that they spend, in tourism, In 2019, it was $45 billion for bird tourism. I had a hard time finding a model of a bird blind in this area that I could say, okay, I'll go find out how much that is, and then I'll ask Metro for that much. There just aren't very many here at all. You can find lots of them in Texas. You can find platforms that go out to lakes and stuff, but this will be a really unique feature for our city and for the nature park. So I'm excited to learn that we've gotten the money. We haven't got it yet, but I'm excited about it. So
Nancy,
if
that's
you have
your
any
time.
questions, let me know.
Next up, we have Janet Simmons in regards to Ridgegate Park.
Hello, I've lived in Gladstone for 24 years and I walk frequently at the Kraxberger Loop and all through Upper Gladstone and down below. I just recently learned that looking at your city website that the Ridgegate, there is a Ridgegate Park. And there's also a parcel across from that park is also a park. I'm just wondering why there is no signage that states that it's the Ridgegate Park. I have concerns about it because it's I know that it's being taken care of, but you know, if we can implement maybe a garbage can with another poop sack station, that would help with litter. There's some people that live up against the park that are throwing dog food, marshmallows, oranges, debris over there. We don't know if it's poisonous, but it invites rodents, possums, coyotes. We don't want that in our city. And wondering what we can do about that. Mostly I'm just worried about the signage and across the park. If we could state that it's a park, is there money in the budget for that or what? That's, yeah.
Typically, we don't answer questions during public comment, but if you wanted to defer that back to staff, then we would be happy to follow up and also let the Parks Board know what the answer is as well.
I would love to defer that back to staff.
Thank you. As far as staff, are you saying, yeah, okay, great.
But you're welcome to stay right there while they tell you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, no, we don't have the answer right
Okay,
now.
all
We
right.
will research that answer and then get back.
I thought we were all going to hear that
Oh,
right now. I think we're as interested as you are.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other business from the audience?
No, that is everything.
Aren't you glad? Okay. All right. So our next meeting is March 11th. We're going to come with a couple of ideas. We're ready to move on our next projects, and one of them is Ridgegate. So if I can have an emotion to adjourn,
Have a motion to adjourn the meeting, Justice Mills.
okay, do we have a second?
Kim Eggerson, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Justice Mills and seconded by Kim Eggerson to adjourn our meeting. All in favor?
Justice Mills, aye.
Kim Eggerson, yes.
David Michael, I.
Nancy, yes?
Bruce Hildreth, yes.
Eric Butler, yes.
Kate Cornelius, yes.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.